is being addressed now. It's whether or not Congress having that authority, there in fact is the criteria that Congress set satisfied in continuing to list the LTTE. So those are two separate questions, and I gave my best and currently am giving my best legal analysis to both.
So back in 2004, it could have been Hezbollah or anybody else for that matter, and not
exactly, because this was a generic question. Does Congress have the power consistent with the First Amendment to create a list?
Okay, great. We're going to take some of your calls as well. The number to call is 416-593-4940. நீங்கள் கேள்விகளை தமிழில் கேட்க வேண்டுமாய் நிச்சயமாக கேட்கலாம். என்னால் முடிந்தவரை மொழிபெயர்ப்பு செய்ய முனைகின்றேன். நல்ல யூரான் யூரானே. நல்ல யூரான் யூரானே.
வணக்கம்.
வணக்கம். உங்களோட தொலைபேசியை கேட்டு பேசுங்க தயவு செய்து.
அன்புடைய உறவுகள் யாவருக்கும் எனது நன்றிகள் பல கோடி ஆகட்டும். உங்கள் இருவருக்கும் சேர்ந்ததாக. நான் சொல்ல வேண்டியதை அவரிடம் பக்குவமாக சொல்லுங்கள். மற்றது ஒன்று நான் முதலாவது சொல்ல வேண்டியது, I am asking excuse with British government if any wrong in my words. I am asking the accused with British government if any wrong in my words, please. நான் சொல்ல போன்றது, நாம் பிழை சொல்ல வேண்டியது பிரிட்டிஷ் கவர்மெண்டை தான், அமெரிக்காவையோ வேறு எந்த நாட்டையும் அல்ல. காரணம், பிரிட்டிஷ் தான் தமிழ் அரசரிடமிருந்து தமிழீழத்தை பருத்தெடுத்தவர்கள். அவர்கள்தான் தமிழர் நாட்டை சிங்கள நாட்டில் ஒன்றாக்கினார்கள். போகும்போது சிங்களவருக்கு மட்டும் முழு நாட்டையும் கையெழுத்து போனார்கள். இன்று அவர்களே இப்பிரச்சனையை சுருக்கமாக தீர்க்க வேண்டும் அல்லவா? இப்போ மீளா சண்டை நடக்கிறது. அற்புதமான நாடு முழுதும் அழிந்து போயிற்று. நல்ல மக்கள் அனாதையாகி விட்டார்கள். இலட்சம் மக்கள் இழந்து விட்டார்கள். தமிழ் மக்கள் இன்று தன் நாட்டைத்தான் கேட்கிறார்கள், சிங்கள நாட்டை அல்ல. புலிகள் தமிழர்களுக்காக தனது உயிர்களை கொடுத்து செத்துக்கொண்டே இருக்கிறார்கள். ஐரோப்பிய நாடுகளோ ஆசிய நாடுகளோ மனமிறங்கி புலிகளுடன் பேசி சமாதானத்தை செய்ய வேண்டுகின்றோம். சிங்களவருக்கு எவ்வளவு உரிமை உண்டோ அவ்வளவு உரிமை பழங்குடி மக்களாகிய பல ஆயிரம் வருஷங்களாக நாங்கள் வாழ்ந்தாங்க பழங்குடி மக்களாகிய தமிழ் மக்களுக்கும் உண்டென்பதை மேன்மை வங்கிய எங்கள் சமாதான புரிசர் விலகிக் கொள்ள வேண்டும் என்று நான் மன்னிப்பாக கேட்டுக்கொள்கிறேன்.
நன்றி ஐயா.
வணக்கம் ஐயா.
நன்றி உங்கள் கேள்விக்கு. Let me try and put the gist of that in English. He's saying it should be the British government that should be held accountable for all of this. The British should be held accountable for all of this because back in the old days when they came to Sri Lanka, they took over the power from the Tamils, and when they left, they gave it back to the Sinhalese only, didn't do a split or didn't give any power back to the Tamils. So they should be the ones who should be held accountable for it. And then he went on to add about how the international community is refusing to see what the Tigers mean to the Tamils and so on. The rest is history. We all know about it. So he's saying it should be the British government that should be held accountable, not the U.S., not any other country.
Well, there's, I suppose, a partial truth in that, but I'm not believing that it's the complete story, because when the Sri Lankan Constitution was launched in 1948, it didn't have inherently discriminatory features in it. It wasn't the British that disfranchised and denationalized 1 million Tamils. That was the Sinhalese government. It wasn't the British that removed, in fact the British insisted on the Article 29 protection of Tamils from religious and other discrimination. That was removed by the Sinhalese. The Sinhalese enacted the Prevention of Terrorism Act. The Sinhalese decided to abrogate Tamil as an official language. Although you could say, well, the British should have insisted at the time that independence was granted on these special constitutional protections that would have prevented this mischief. When they in fact did so in Article 29, the Sinhalese just removed it unilaterally in 1972 from the Constitution without any vote whatsoever. I think at this stage the way in which morality and history and international law operates, the British role is history, no matter how nefarious. We need to focus right now in 2008 on how we can get a consensus for this need for a free and fair referendum on statehood under United Nations auspices and these other sorts of things. That's whether it's perfect justice or not, we have to confront reality.
True enough. Jiva, you're on air. Jiva? Diane, you're on air.
Hello?
Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you for supporting our Tamils, the human rights. So my question is, when this Kosovo started fighting, the Bill Clinton has brought up this to UN Security Council to act right away on the behalf of the Kosovo people and withdraw all the troops from Kosovo and help their country. So we've been fighting over 30 years, is killed so many people. So what are the chances so they're going to bring it to the UN Security Council and discuss this matter and taking action against Sri Lankan the government? That's my question.
The answer depends largely on how the Tamil diaspora responds in some sense to the Tamils for Justice and my overture. I'm seeking all of your support. I'm seeking your financial assistance as well, so we can speak unified for the first time, perhaps in 30 or 40 years, about the need for a free and fair referendum. It's been splintered in the past, but there's no doubt that it can be done. You're pointing out the situation in Kosovo. The persecution of the Tamils is at least tenfold more acute than the Kosovar Albanians ever suffered under Milosevic. Milosevic didn't exclude CNN and international observers. I mean, there's a blackout, basically, on all the human rights violations in Sri Lanka. And, of course, there's nothing that really matches the Prevention of Terrorism Act as a signature of despotism of a government over a minority in Sri Lanka anywhere else in the world today. And there is the ability of the United Nations Security Council, given the proper resolve, to move with some expedition, but it's got to be pushed and hectored, and that's why we've come here to try to get a unified voice. It can be done faster rather than later with that kind of resolve. If I was to ask ordinary person in 1996 or 97, is Kosovo going to be independent? They'd say that's silly. There's Milosevic. He's vicious. He's strong. He doesn't care about the international sentiment, and yet Kosovo is independent today. There are a lot of flukish things that can happen. To some sense, the Rajapakses are our best friend. I mean, what can you think of a government that goes over and embraces President Ahmadinejad in Iran? At a time they're seeking international support, and here's somebody who's a pariah in the eyes not only of the United States but the international community for the nuclear development, for holding an international conference on Holocaust denial and other such lunacies. And that's why the time now is so propitious to moving forward. The international community is perched and eager to listen to a unified Tamil diaspora. That's what we're trying to put together this particular trip and other following trips.
Let me quickly ask you a question. Now, you mentioned Rajapaksa is our friend. I understand where you're going with that. Let's hypothetically speaking, let's say there's a change in government in Sri Lanka. What are the possibilities of your project going through?
Listen, the best thing in the world would if the project wasn't needed. Wouldn't it be great to have, in fact, Tamils treated as first-class citizens? My own reading of 60 years of history indicates to me that the likelihood of change, fundamental change, a repeal of the Prevention of Terrorism Act, for instance, the clear gesture of bringing Tamils back within the law, is exceptionally remote. Remember, even when there seemed to be...
Don't get me wrong. I'm not even wishfully thinking that the next government will recognize the Tamils. It's still going to be the same scenario, but what if Rajapaksa regime is removed and another regime comes into place?